Hello, Trail Seeker, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Learn True Health podcast. Today is part 2 of our 2-part interview with Dr. John. Man, he definitely does expand your mind to what is possible, doesn't he? I love the work that he does with animals as well, and in this episode he gets into that a little bit, which is really interesting. But first, I want to answer some questions about my upcoming workshop that you definitely want to sign up for. It is absolutely affordable. You should definitely sign up for it. It is my New Year's Health Transformation Workshop, where we get together in January. Each week in January, we get together for one evening a week for a webinar where we explore the fundamentals of what it is you need to do in order to achieve optimal health. Whether you are someone who goes to the gym and takes your supplements and you think you eat all the vegetables in the world, or whether you're someone who knows you are indulging a ton in the holiday festivities and you have never stepped foot in a gym. Either way, this is for absolutely everyone, because it is an actionable workshop that has you do things that are fun and things that get great health results. So we're going to get back down to the fundamentals of what helps 100% of the population to feel better and be healthier. And that's exactly what everyone needs. So before we get into anything fancy or technical, you really need to lay down the foundation. And lucky for you, the foundation steps to health are something that you can do in my workshop that's fun and that is very affordable. You don't need to buy a fancy machine or pay for thousands of dollars worth of products or join some membership gym. None of that. All these things that we're going to do together are things that you can do in your own home, and you will do around your home and in your life to vastly improve your sleep, your energy, your joy and vibrance in your life, your mental clarity, even your immune system, your overall sense of well-being will transform. And so what's great about my course is that it's all about taking actions and doing it together and doing it in a supportive way. I will teach you how to implement new health habits that stick and that will stick for the long term, not just something that you do in January and then give up by February. You're going to stick with these health habits through all of 2019, and it's going to make a big difference in your life. Some questions came up in the Facebook group. One of them was about the dates, and another one was whether someone could watch it if they didn't have access to the internet in the evenings. So good news is, if you know you're really busy and you're worried that you wouldn't be able to make it to one of the live webinars, which I encourage you to do if you can, but if you can't, then you will have access to the replays for a limited time. So you will be able to access the webinar that happened that week so that you can stay on top of it with us. And you will also be able to be part of the webinar even if you're traveling, because it's through Zoom. So you can have that on your phone, like if you're at your kid's soccer game or hockey game or whatever, or if you're driving home at that time. I'm going to have them in the evenings late enough that hopefully everyone will be home. But if you're still commuting home, no worries. You can throw it on your Bluetooth and just listen to the webinar and participate that way. And then you'll, again, also have access to the replays. So I'm going to make it accessible to everyone. So there's no excuses. We're going to get this done. And I'll also be summarizing each webinar and giving everyone the homework and emailing that to everyone. So we will have all the steps and the homework and everything we need to transform our health in 2019. So you can go eat that Christmas cookie or go to that next holiday dinner guilt-free, because you know you're really going to hit the ground running in 2019 by joining my workshop. And all you need to do is go to learntruehealth.com/yes. That's learntruehealth.com/yes. Sign up now. It is only $37, and it's a 4-week webinar. So we're all going to rock this together. If you guys have any more questions, please feel free to reach me. You can join the Facebook group and ask in the Facebook group, or you can email me, ashley@learntruehealth.com. I'd love to hear from you if you have any questions about this. Enjoy today's interview. And boy, after today, I have a lineup of interviews I can't wait to edit and publish for you guys, because the people I've been interviewing in the last week have just rocked my world. You think today's interview is deep? Wait until you hear the next few episodes. It's going to be awesome. We're going down some pretty deep rabbit holes. I'm so happy that you guys are here with me on this journey of holistic health. Remember, health is emotional, mental, spiritual, energetic, and physical. We have to look at all aspects of our life and our psyche and make sure that we are healing on every level, because we are not just a meat sack. There's so much more to us than just a physical body. There is that mental body, emotional body. We have that intuition. We have so many other parts of ourselves. And when we acknowledge that and look into how we can gain a balanced life, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, energetically, and physically, then we will be better because of it. So enjoy today's interview. Thank you for being a listener, and thank you for being part of this wonderful journey. And please join the Facebook group and let me know what you think about this really interesting interview. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Just find us on Facebook, Learn True Health on Facebook, or you can go to learntruehealth.com/group. Excellent. And definitely join the workshop, New Year's Health Transformation, by going to learntruehealth.com/yes. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 314. And now for the continuation, the part 2 of our interview with Dr. John Veltheim. Can you learn Bodytalk Access online, or do you need to be in person?
When you first learn it, needs to be in person. There's something you can do. I talked about the cortices. One of the first techniques I learned in Bodytalk, or developed in Bodytalk, was the cortices, because I realized from my study as a neurologist was that the left and right hemispheres of the brain do not communicate well, and they often get stressed in that communication. The corpus callosum doesn't send the signals back and forward, and the left and right brain don't, express each other well, and this is getting worse and worse. And in fact, there's a lovely study done in Cambridge University, The Man with Two Brains, I think it's called, where they have studied in detail the left and right brain and the differences between them, and differences between the personality, and how, the right brain is very much the intuitive side, the higher learning side. It's a better computer, etc. The left brain is more practical, etc. But if you look at history, what they did at Cambridge, they had experts in studying skulls, inside of skulls, so they could look at skulls a few hundred years old, and because of the shape inside, which they can look all the same on the outside, but the curvatures are bigger, the spaces are bigger, etc., they could trace the history. And what they showed, in the 1400s and 1600s, the right brain totally dominating the left. It was always much bigger than the left brain. And that's why religion and all that dominated over science. And if you're a scientist, you usually got killed for it, right? And then what happened is there was a swing occurred in more recent centuries where, say, in the 1800s and late 1700s, science started to win out, because the scientists started coming up with some really cool stuff and developed trains and all sorts of things, and eventually cars and light bulbs, etc., which people liked. And so we saw this change in dominance from right brain to left brain going into the 1900s, where it became more so that the left brain started then being more important than the right brain. And there was a transition, because it shows in the inside of the skulls. In the inside of the skulls, they have changed their shape to accommodate for this. And but in the meantime, it's caused disruption in the relationship between the left and right brains, because they've had to move physically and got out of line with one another. is a more detailed explanation of that. And as such, the enormous corpus callosum communication doesn't occur very well. And in fact, in Cambridge, they showed that when the right brain was sending signals to the left to, keep it abreast of what it's doing, the left brain usually responded. But what they found is the response was to actually destroy or negate the information coming from the right brain. In other words, they were hostile to one another. They were fighting one another, and they'd wipe out that information. The right brain did it to the left brain. So that was, and what we've seen is the battle of the sexes, right? The right brain female, the left brain the male, and they're fighting, and we see that in the world out there. But it's a reflection of what's going on inside our brain. Now, as a result, the brain has had to rely not on communication in the normal way, the most common way through the corpus callosum. They have to rely on electromagnetic frequencies, which they always use to a certain extent, but now they're having to use it more and more. And this is high-speed frequencies to send the information across, which is cool, except then we buggered that up because we've brought in all these electronic devices, and every time you put your cell phone up to your ear, you're actually blowing out these electromagnetic frequencies, and it's causing a lot of problem. And this means the brain starts getting stressed and starts shutting down and doesn't work as well. And so while this adaptation occurs as physically part of the evolutionary process, we have this problem of electromagnetic frequencies that can't do their job because of all the EMFs around. So what I developed when we were doing the cortices is that the EMFs they blow circuits, as it were. And, you have a circuit breaker. Well, the technique we do of bridging the brain and tapping it out, it restores those EMFs, restores their functioning, the ability to function. So it increases the brain function fairly dramatically and reduces the stress of the brain. Now, this is only a temporary fix. It's something that you have to do occasionally because we're always blowing circuits because we live in an area where we're getting bombarded by electromagnetic frequencies. But in Bodytalk, what we do is I realign the two hemispheres of the brain so the corpus callosum can work a lot better, and that puts less demand. And then the cortices treatment that we do is designed to correct the electromagnetic frequencies that have blown. It's like resetting their circuits so they start functioning properly. Therefore, the brain works better, they're more relaxed, they sleep better, life is better. But the trouble is you have to keep doing it because we keep blowing the fuses every time we're using a telephone, sitting in front of TV, etc. And eventually, of course, we'll find ourselves focusing more on the physical brains so that and when that gets working better, then you won't have to rely on the electromagnetic frequencies. But anyway, the cortices is designed as a first aid for that. In other words, and this if you go on YouTube and just put in my name or Bodytalk, you'll see quite a few little videos of me explaining the cortices. We teach that to everybody and anybody, because anyone can learn it. In fact, we teach it to little kids, preschoolers, and they pick it up and learn it and use it. And it only takes you a few minutes. And by using that simple procedure, it reconditions the brain, keeps the stress levels down, and makes everything function better. So it's a first aid kit for the body to compensate for the changes that are occurring in the brain and all the stuff on the outside. And we've taught that. I've taught that all over the world to thousands of people and so have our practitioners. In fact, I think on the internet or even on our website, we've got a photo of a Filipino church with about 2,000 people sitting in the church, and they're all doing their cortices on themselves before they start the religious service. And we've got schools that it's automatic. The kids all do cortices on themselves or on each other before they start school. And what they've shown is a dramatic improvement in scholastic achievement, ability, and behavior in the schools. We actually did one of those in south side of Chicago years ago that was essentially paid for by Oprah Winfrey.
Mm.
And we worked on kids that had to stay in school in summer because they were way behind in their studies, etc. And the type of kids just wanted to stay there until they could legally leave and then go out in the streets. And it was an area very much of a pretty depressed type area economically. But what we did is during their summer holidays, we brought in a couple of people supplied by the famous African American senator, former senator Jesse someone.
Mm-hmm.
And what we did is we arranged to train people from that area in courtesies, and they went every day at the beginning of the day and did the courtesies on the kids. And then the idea was the parents were told to, they did an evaluation form before we started, an evaluation, 6 weeks later, and the teachers too. And the changes were nothing short of spectacular in behavior, in scholastic ability. A lot of those kids were doing mathematics and reading for the first time in their life, even though they were 13 years of age. And we've heard since that several of those kids in that program went on have gone to university, where at the time of the program, all they wanted to do was decide which street gang to be in.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that makes a big difference. And, we're doing that in indigenous societies and things like that all over the world. And my foundation helps to pay for a lot of that, but unfortunately it does cost a lot. So anyone wants to donate to a foundation to help children make themselves better, we'd appreciate it. Just go on our website and you'll see the IBF site with an explanation for it. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, the other thing that we do access for and Bodytalk is animals, because they respond so well to it.
Mm.
So if you've got a dog that's too hyperactive or a cat that's a bit crazy on it, I suggest you put them down. But if you don't want to do that, you do access on them. And, I've seen cats that would not be picked up and, very agitated. And you do access. You don't have to touch them. You can do it a little bit from a distance, And you do the access. You do it 3 or 4 times, once a day for about 3 days. And it can be transformational. You've suddenly got yourself a lap cat. And animals respond beautifully. They're my favorite to treat. Like I said, I've always wanted to treat an animal more. And, two examples of that was when I was in Africa in Nairobi. I was invited onto one of the areas that was a rehab place for rhinos and elephants that had been abandoned as babies, or usually abandoned because poachers had killed the parents for their horns, right? And then they left the babies there to die. And the one when I was there, they had to do cesarean sections to get an elephant baby out and a rhinoceros baby, and they brought them into their center, but they were cesarean babies, and they were so nervous and shaking so much they would not eat or drink. Well, they wouldn't drink. And the vets there said, they won't live. They've only got a couple of hours. We can't do anything about it. Nothing happens. I said, okay, well, leave him with me for a moment. And I went over and worked on this little elephant. And when I went to go, he wrapped his little trunk around me and wouldn't let me go. And then I worked on the rhinoceros who was hiding under a blanket. And I worked on him. And I went out, and about an hour later, I'm talking to the vet, and he looks at me and says, look. And I look over, and both the elephant and the rhino were with one of the guys bottle feeding them and guggling it down. And they've sent me photos of them every year for the last 5 years, and they're now a big rhino and a big elephant. And that they respond so well. Animals to Bodytalk. It's I'd say some of my biggest miracles have been with animals, and what we've been able to do, especially animals that are basically going to be put down, and you treat them, and they're healthy animals within a few weeks. The wilder they are, the easier, because unfortunately, most domestic animals are dogs and cats, and unfortunately, they have a syndrome called the human owner syndrome, which tends to make them quite neurotic. Trying to understand what in the hell the human wants them to do. And but we've found those humans, if they come along and learn the access and they do it on the dogs, I tell them, do it on yourself too, because you're a little bit excitable. And they said, my animal's improving, but so am I.
Do you often see that a disease that is manifested in the human owner is mirrored in their animal?
Very often. Especially dogs. Dogs, especially a lot of the domestic dogs, are trained to protect and serve, right? And part of protection is to protect them from harm. And in a dog's point of view, protecting from harm might be someone off the street, or someone being aggressive, or another aggressive dog. But a lot of the harm from a dog's point of view is energetic to them because they're very much into energy. So if their partner's got a liver disease, their owner's got a liver disease, they're aware of that disease, right? Now, oftentimes they just try and give them attention and be with them, etc., which can help heal. But sometimes the parents, the adults don't let them do that. They keep them outside or whatever, or give them away. And I've had quite a number of cases where I've looked at a person and seen them, they've got a liver disease, and a pretty serious one. And then I said, just let me check your dog, because the dog is looking lethargic. And the dog had also all the signs of liver disease, that he was trying to take it from his owner to help. But in the meantime, it was holding it because the dog couldn't clear it, because the owner was too bad. Both the dog and the owner were really sick, although the dog wouldn't show it. But for treatment, I treated the dog, because they respond so much easier than humans. And when I treated the dog, within a few days, the owner was better and had liver tests and they're all clear. So very often to treat an owner, you need to treat the dog. And of course, if you look at the younger dogs, you talk about a neurotic dog. It's not a neurotic dog, thank you. It's a neurotic owner that is hiding it very well, so the dog's expressing it for them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And
with so many dogs, the person you need on the table is the owner. And usually you need to give them a bottle of whiskey just to quieten them down enough to treat them, And then their dogs suddenly become nice, sweet dogs, because owners don't like being told that. I'm more diplomatic normally. I've got a very healthy, beautiful therapy dog.
Of course you do.
Yeah, and he loves being around when I'm treating people, and he occasionally gets up and puts his paws on the table, and I say, should I be doing that? And you can he puts his paw somewhere else on the body. I said, just check that. Oh yeah, okay. It would be better to do that first. It's quite fascinating. The animals can tune in.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. This 1-day course that anyone can take, you don't have to be a practitioner.
It's called Bodytalk Access, and if you go on our site and you look that up, there are classes going on all over the world. We have hundreds of teachers all over the world teaching it. And it's 1 day, it's quite reasonable cost. It'll depend on where you are in the world. If you're in southern Thailand, it's probably going to be $5. But if you're in New York, it may be $105. But we try and keep it at a price that people can afford. And you just spend the day there, you do the practical on each other, and it's easy to learn because the manual is very clear. You get a good manual with it. And then you go away and you practice it for a little while. Most people, I find, children will pick it up on that same day. Adults, seniors can often find they've got to go home and study it a bit, and it might take them a week or so. But to actually then do the techniques, you can just do the cortices because that's taught. But if you do the whole program, it can take like 15, 20 minutes. But if you did it on yourself and members of your family, even just once a week, it's preventative maintenance and preventative health. But it's also designed that if something comes up, for example, if they're coming down with a flu, there is a treatment we use for the body's immune system. So it's a treatment that will then activate the immune system to take on the flu or whatever else is coming in. So there are first aid treatments for someone coming down with a virus or coming down with an infection that you can use. But our guideline is if they haven't improved dramatically within a day or two, you should be looking at either more advanced Bodytalk or your doctor. Fortunately with Access, it works quickly. So it's designed to help. It helps in injuries. You sprain an ankle, instead of going to the doctor, you go home and you do Access on it and do it a couple of times a day for a couple of days. It gets better, much faster than anything else. And so it covers quite a few basic things that come up. And also, we encourage people to do it regularly on each other in a family because it's maintenance. If you keep balancing, keep the stresses low, you reduce the number of diseases. And what we have found is families that have learned Access, when they use it, even on their extended families, they have noticed this dramatic difference in the number of times people get sick in winter and come down with flus and belly aches and things like that, and how quickly they respond from injuries and sprains and all that type of thing. It's not the be all and end all, but it's designed to be a very helpful home tool. We have a lot of practitioners who have learned it because it's a good way of finding out. A lot of them do that and they use it on their patients just to see how effective these basic techniques are before they invest the time to then want to learn the more advanced work.
For practitioners who are listening, what courses should they take to add to their tool belt?
The original one that they should take is what we call our fundamentals technique. And it's usually 4 days. They're pretty full days. It's got a very big, very, very clear textbook. And they take you through the principles of body talk and about all the stuff that was in Access, but then probably about 15 more techniques, but basically principles that can be applied. Because there's not a lot of techniques to learn. It's learning the principles and then using your own knowledge, to work it, because you can be specialized in, body talk. And that enables people, if you're already a practitioner, that enables you immediately to use it with your skills that you have. Laymen can do it. They do the 4 days, but if they want to be recognized for what they're doing, they need to do an advanced version of that and repeat the original one, and they have to sit both oral and written exams to become what we call a certified body talk practitioner. And that's at a very basic level. That's really not so much a professional level unless you're a professional in some other healthcare. But it does enable you to do a lot more with family and friends. From then, if you really want to get our first level, which is advanced certification, or it's going to be changed to a diploma, then it's a matter of continuing to do more modules. A lot of them are done online on our Parama campus, the ones that can be. A lot of them need practicals, so they're taught by instructors. And a lot of them are done live stream, where I teach people all over the world live stream. But the idea is as you accumulate them, and you, in some of them, of course, you've got to pass exams to get through, but you can do the exams 6 months later. You accumulate, I'd say, about 18 different subjects, or a bit less than that, to get the diploma level, and probably take you about 2.5 years on average to, especially if you're in practice or something, to part-time learn it all, study it all, and pass the exams. And then the diploma. And the diploma, we also include that you have to do some of the basic sciences. In other words, they've got to do, if they haven't already done it, they've got to do anatomy and physiology and basic pathology, basic first aid and things like that, which is necessary. We use the Australian model. If you want to be a practitioner that's recognized by the government in non-medical things such as acupuncture and everything like that, they have a set standard curriculum of basic sciences that ensure that you're not dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've got to be able to know if someone comes in with a rash, you've got to know that whether it's contagious or not. You've got to be able to listen to a heart and make sure that their chest pain is not having a heart attack and things like that. And so when you've done that level of course, that certifies you, like in Australia, to get full government recognition and patients can come to you. And then those who are really keen, they want to keep going on to the equivalent of the degree course. At this stage, we're calling it advanced certification. That's about another 2 to 3 years to learn it properly, because there's a lot of work in there. I teach a lot of theoretical physics, because although I haven't mentioned it, a lot of my techniques now, and a lot of the techniques of body talk are based on quantum theory, and I'm pretty good at quantum theory. And we learn a lot of very advanced courses for high-speed communication, for treating difficult things, etc. And that's in more advanced work. And we also do a lot more in the way of philosophy and the philosophy behind quantum physics, which is also quantum philosophy and overlaps to the Indian philosophies and things like that, of which I've been studying. I've been studying Indian philosophy and Advaita Vedanta since I was like 9. So, plus other philosophies, of course. And a lot of our practitioners, they specialize, because you can, once you get your basics, some go primarily just into the working with it with brain disorders, and others go into it just specializing in immune disorders and so on. Or you can be a general practitioner. It's an exciting trend.
Brilliant. It does sounds very exciting. Now you have about 300 instructors that you've trained, how does one go about becoming an instructor? Do they have to take all the levels that you've mentioned to become an instructor?
No, depending on instructor to what level. Our, our, our access instructors, of which we've got a lot of, they've still got to do their fundamentals, access, and they've got to do their fundamentals course and become what we call a CVP. So they've got to do the fundamentals course twice, and they've got to do another advanced course and pass exams. And once they're a CVP, then they can then do an exam and train as an instructor. It's not hard to train. And then they get certified as an access instructor. And they teach, a lot of them go on there. They decide then they want to teach fundamentals, which is a bigger course, but that will involve a bit more study and doing a bit more things. At the access, we have a lot of access instructors, who really haven't done a lot of body talk, but they've done enough to become access teachers. But they're teaching in all wild and woody parts of the world, places I'd love to be able to go and teach. And if you actually go on our website, and particularly if one of the branches of their website is the IBF, my foundation, you'll see little films and photos of everything of some of the stuff we've done all over the world. And it's very exciting to see little African kids. We found little kids learn it faster than the adults. So if we go into a village and we train everyone in the village, by the end of the day, the kids all know it. Some of the adults never learn it, or it may take a while. So the kids become the practitioners, treating, doing all the preventative maintenance treatments on the adults, which is fun to see. It's just the difference in the culture,
I bet. Now, people who have difficult illnesses like Epstein-Barr virus, chronic viral infections, or Lyme disease and their co-infections, they have seen great success working with your practitioners or working with your system. I know that when we were talking yesterday in preparation for our interview, you told me a story, which I think would be wonderful to share with the listeners. We told me a story of one of your past clients who had Lyme.
Yeah, that was typical of the cases I do, but it was more interesting because it's a very well-known person. I realized she has given me permission to mention her name. It was Sam Stauser, who was an Australian tennis player. And she was a good player, very good player. But she'd got to a stage several years ago where her ranking in doubles was number 2 in the world. I was a brilliant doubles player. But her ranking in singles was about 500. And the reason is she had very bad Lyme disease and I think some Epstein-Barr. And she just could not stay on the court long enough to play a singles match and all the running around necessary. And doubles, she sort of had to win in 2 sets, so she'd be in big trouble too. And so she was looking at retiring because she's also in a lot of pain. It can be quite painful, especially when you get the combinations. But her mother discovered Bodytalk and in fact did the first course in it and told her about it. So when I was in a conference in Northern Florida, in Tampa, we had a conference and they contacted me that Sam wanted to see me. And I knew Sam. She was quite a famous tennis, sporting celebrity. I didn't know her personally, but I knew of it, that's for sure. And I said, yeah. So she came down to the conference and laid on the table, and you couldn't believe she had a problem because she'd built, I can't say it here, but in Australia we thought that she'd built like a brick shit house, really strong, muscles everywhere. But she couldn't run half a mile without collapsing. And she, lifting her head off the pillow was a problem. So I treated her, and she was a good case to treat because her body was strong, really strong. The rest of the vitals were good. So she responded well, but I only treated her once. And she had to go back. I think she was heading off to France for the French Open, I think. That was due in about 2 months. And she wanted to be able to have recoup time. So off she went. Then what happened to her for the rest of the year, she went to the French Open and lost the fight, played in the doubles, lost the semi-finals, went to Wimbledon, played in the semi-finals, then went to the US Open and won the finals in the same year. And she went from that 400 down to ranking of 5 in the world. And she stayed in that upper 5 ranking for a couple of years, completely reinvigorated because it was gone. She rang me to say it was gone. She got a high fever for a little while, and by the next day she got up totally free of it. And now they don't always respond like that. She was a good case because other than that, she was healthy. And other than that, she was super fit, and super strong. So therefore, she was a great case to work with. But if you get the average person who's run down, stressed, overweight, and a whole lot of problems and been wandering around Canada somewhere trying to pat deer, and then they get Lyme disease, they're not necessarily a good patient. It can take 4 or 5 treatments, to get that same result because their basic vitality you've got to build up to start with. Because some of those diseases, the problem is that the body's immune system is not vital enough. And it's got to be recorrected.
When you say 4 or 5 treatments, which I mean is nothing compared to what people suffer when they go more mainstream or when they go the more traditional treatment for Lyme, they could be suffering for the rest of their life with all the co-infections. Yeah. But when you say they go to a talk practitioner and they get 4 or 5 treatments or sessions, what does that look like? Is it a 60-minute session? Does that look like maybe 4 or 5 weeks worth of work, or 4 or 5 months? How long would someone take to get their health back?
There's a couple of factors there. One is their health. One is the extent of training and experience of the practitioner in tough cases, right? But in general, when you go to a practitioner, it doesn't take a long time. If they're a fairly new practitioner, they'd like to take time and explain everything and do a lot of talking, etc. I do talking, but I talk only about what's wrong with them. I don't talk about their new car they bought and a whole lot of other things, and which I think, people lose focus. When I practiced just as a body talker, I had a clinic going here in Sarasota for 9 months. And during that time, we did a calculation that the average number of treatments I had, no matter what was wrong with them, was about 3. Okay. I rarely had to see people more than 3 times, and usually maybe once a week for 3 weeks. If possible, I like them coming back a few months later for me to check if there's anything else to tidy up. There are some severe chronic type disorders that it's a long time. I mean, you get some very chronic back problems, etc. You can improve them, but it is ongoing, and it will be ongoing. And sometimes it really is a case that you have to teach the patient how to do things. A good example of that, and it amazed me as a chiropractor, because I know my spine. But one of my first ever cases I saw when I was first teaching Bodytalk, and still learning what it could do, because I'm head of colleges and things like that. I couldn't believe this stuff is so simple, yet getting these results. And but I was teaching it in Rochester, New York, and it was my first class in America. And one of the women there, she was 33 and a cripple. She had a scoliosis where the lower part of the scoliosis was actually resting on her pelvic bone. And she was totally crippled up. She couldn't stand for any length of time. She made a living hunched over a guitar, singing folk songs in a coffee lounge. But other than that, she could walk maybe 10 yards without having to lie down or whatever. So it was a very, very bad case. And it looked worse because she was quite thin. And anyway, she asked me about results. And I said, well, something like that, you've got to completely rehab the whole body. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. And the best thing is you're going to have to learn how to do it. And I see your friends come with you. But you're going to have to persist with it. You're going to have to treat basically just using access techniques, actually, what we call the ones that balance out your posture. So it was actually only access techniques she was using, but I want them done every day. And eventually you can taper it out to every week, etc. But you've got to be persistent. And she says, I will be, because I've got nothing better to do. And I expected her over a period of time to be much less pain and have more flexibility. But what happened is 2 years later, I had my first conference. And I was having a meeting at my house of people from various parts of the world. I had quite a lot of Americans there and Swedish and things like that. And in walked this woman. I didn't recognize her. And she stood there, and she had this sort of simple dress on. And I had quite a few Americans standing next to me. This is important for the story because she said, "Hi, John, do you recognize me?" And I'm trying to recognize her. And she said, "Well," and she grabbed the dress and just stripped it straight off. And she stood there stark naked and turned around to show me her back. And then I recognized her. She was that lady, except her back was dead straight. And I got talking to her. She said I did it every day, sometimes twice a day. And after a few months, I felt nothing much. But then I went through time. Every time I did it, I felt creaks and groans and the body trying to move and change its positioning and everything. And she said, now I play tennis, I do Bodytalk treatments, and I go for long walks and horse riding every day. And she's gone back to her orthopedic surgeon. You know, he could see her, and then he saw x-rays, and he says, well, medically, this is impossible. And you know what? Even with Bodytalk, it would have been impossible if you weren't dedicated enough to follow up and do those things. So, as I've always said in my practice, the impossible, I can do it once, but miracles take a little longer. You know? And hers was a miracle, and it took longer. It took 2 years, but it was a miracle.
Brilliant.
And in that case, she could treat us. Most of the time, she was treating herself, although a girlfriend would help her occasionally. So you can't underestimate it's not about Bodytalk. It's the power of the body to heal itself if given the opportunity. You know, Bodytalk isn't healing. All it's doing is setting up the conditions in the body to enable it to heal itself, and also to get clarity. A lot of people, when they do Bodytalk, they start automatically realizing, I shouldn't be eating so much steak and I shouldn't be having that. Because if their body feels healthier, suddenly a lot of foods they eat give them tummy aches and don't feel right. And they'll gravitate to better food and better lifestyle choices, etc. And because that's a very important part of it. You know, you can't ignore that. And for me, although I'm trained in those fields years ago in my own practice, because of the volume I was seeing, I actually had other practitioners for that. You know, nutritionists and things like that for that auxiliary work. And because as far as I'm concerned, a good practice has got to involve people who can advise in nutrition. It's got to involve good counselors who can help people in their lifestyle, etc. And I had, massage therapists, but particularly lymphatic work, lymphatic drainage, which I think is very good. I even developed my own system of lymphatic drainage, which is being taught in a lot of places in the world now. And, you know, all those things are important because health is a holistic thing. But one of the most important things is just to get the body wired that it thinks clearly, the three brains communicate properly, and it has better understanding of why they're ill. And once you set up those conditions, then I've given up saying, no, I couldn't fix this. The number of people I've treated that really have been given, you know, less than a month to live or so on is, I couldn't count them. And sure, there's been cases where they still died. And that's a cure too. I have found death can cure any known disease. You know? Sorry, my Australian sense of humor.
I love your sense of humor.
Cured them, they died, right. But I would have to say, in a variety of stuff that you would see, including some just sports medicine and stuff like that, my success rate as a chiropractor, acupuncturist, etc., on those average things, especially sports medicine, was high, probably about 70% to 80%. And if you're honest, that's usually very good high. A lot of people think because they haven't come back, they fixed them. That isn't the case. They may not have come back because you didn't fix them. Although my staff always did follow-ups. But I would have to say my success rate when I've used Bodytalk, even on back problems and things like that, is much, much higher and much, much more lasting.
Wonderful.
Because we can just do so much.
Right. Is there anything you can teach over a podcast? Is there a technique or anything that you could teach us today that a listener could shift their life in a positive way?
Unfortunately, there's a visual side of it. So I'd rather they went on YouTube and looked at the cortices treatment technique.
Okay.
Preferably done by me. There's apparently about 60 versions on there. You know, really keen body talkers will put it on there. and some of them not being quite accurate in my tone. But if you look at one of my tapes, I've also got some tapes talking about some of the aspects of body talk there. To me, the most important introduction to body talk would be courtesies and doing the courtesies. And also the access manual. It's a little booklet. You can learn quite a lot out of that without an instructor, and you can buy that on Amazon or any place there. It's quite a big seller actually. And other than that, if people want to have a better understanding of body talk, besides my textbooks, I've written a paperback book on the science and philosophy of body talk. And in it, I really go into it in quite a lot of depth, but built for the intelligent layperson. Right? And so that you have a very good hold on what is going on. And I've got an introduction on science from James Oshman. You've probably even had him on your show. He's quite famous. He's written the books on energy medicine, the science of energy medicine, etc. So he and I have gravitated. In fact, his new book he's got out, big seller, he's actually put a write-up on me and a photo on it because he loves my work. And I've got a lot of people like that. And my general book is good. But other than that, if you really want to get into learning it, other than the courtesies, you're best to really look up an access teacher. And that's just a one-day commitment.
Right.
Sometimes they do it in 2 nights, depending on where they are. And I don't know, the price varies. In some parts of America, I think it's like $80 or $100. In some parts of the world, maybe a bit more than that. And probably less than what a treatment costs in a lot of parts of America. But that would be the best way to go. And if you do that, you read my book, or you just go onto the website. There's a lot of articles by me. There's a lot of videos of me and other instructors talking about body talk. It's fairly comprehensive. And you can also ask questions there, and they'll be answered. If the people who monitor it can't answer them, they send them to me, and I file them under R for rubbish bin.
Yeah, right.
No, I try and get round to answering them, but I have and as far as treatment goes, there's a lot of practitioners. Don't try and get to see me. I'm not in practice anymore. I always have typical waiting lists when I do. And what I do occasionally is with the members, like when I travel, they bring in their tough cases and I teach them what they needed to do to get that fixed, and I fix it. And occasionally you can do a distant treatment, but if you don't have a certain level of training, because energy medicine can be done at a distance, and I even have a class that teaches the physics of that and why it can be. And but even then, every so often we put out on the internet that I'm wanting a few cases because I'm, developing new aspects, but I'd still treat them generally, and hopefully the new aspect would come up. And last time I told my receptionist, look, I only want 30 people, so stop when they get 30 people. So she put it on the internet. She went away. She come back 2 hours later to see how it was going. We already had 300 people booked in and paid.
Oh no!
And, and we couldn't then tell them, no, we're sending it back. So she closed the door. So instead of 30 people, I had to treat 300. But that's sort of my life. We keep it very quiet when. But once some guinea pigs now, we sort of ring up people.
Very cool. Well, so your website, which is bodytalksystem.com, has a lot of great information on it. If someone wants to find a local practitioner, they can go to your website and look up a local practitioner in their area.
Yeah, we have a listing of all the practitioners in the world, and you can find out. The website also you can click on for German and Spanish and Portuguese and all that type of thing. And we have lecturers. We have practitioners speaking. I think the last count was 13 languages.
Very cool.
Are covered, and we're in 30 countries. And so some countries are hard to get into. Interesting, acupuncture is totally recognized by the French government as a technique that you can use in hospitals and everything, but we've only got 2 practitioners there. which is weird. It's sort of, we got recognized by the French government before we really existed in France.
Ah, cool.
Due to a few very prominent Frenchmen who had had treatment in Germany and think this is what France needs.
Nice.
But, yeah, Europe, we've got a very big following in Europe. And as I said, one of the big active areas is with animal work and with indigenous tribes in areas like that, in Africa and the Philippines and things like that. We have a lot of people who go and volunteer their time. And we also train people like in access teaching and then even in fundamentals teaching. But we train them at virtually a price they can afford, which may be a year's living, $50, but they can then teach it locally and only charge small amounts according to the local village where, $10 is a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So as such, we've made it, there's a lot of countries now we've made it very available at local prices, but we needed local teachers.
Right.
Because if an instructor has to fly in there, just their airfare alone, they wouldn't recuperate.
Right.
And a few would do it. We've got a few fairly wealthy instructors who make a point of going into areas where they can't afford to pay and do it. But the average instructor still has to have enough money to eat and get home. But what we've managed to do is train a lot of the local people who live locally with local wages, etc. And hence we can get people learning it. To me, that's a very important part because it's safe. It doesn't require expensive machines or expensive drugs. It's not the be-all and end-all, but my God, in an average village, it'll take care of 70% of their problems. And that's a big deal. Now, for the 30%, because they've been horned by a rhino or their little toe's been bitten off by a leopard, then they're going to need their doctors.
And for the average American or Canadian or Australian or, Brit, I mean, my God, to be able to have these tools just to be able to, boost our immune system, support our family, to deal with 70% of the stuff that comes up, that's a big deal. It's a big deal. And also, off air, we talked yesterday about diet and how you can use these techniques to listen to the body and figure out what does the body actually need? And that's one of the biggest questions. That's why Dr. Mark Hyman, who came on my show, has a best-selling book called Food, What the Heck Should I Eat? And that's because no one knows what to eat that's healthy for them. But what you're saying is that by learning these techniques to listen to the body, listen to the gut and the heart and the brain and listen to what the body actually needs. And also the biome, what we need to feed those gut bugs.
Well, the biome is one of the most important things because it determines what you can eat and what you can absorb. And the reason there's so-called cultural eating is because there's cultural microbiomes, right? So if you're in an area where everyone's heavy meat eater, Texas or something like that, you're going to find the microbiome leans very, very strongly towards processing meat, right? Mm-hmm. And where if you go out to other areas and you go to the California and all the crazies and all I do is eat turnips and spinach under a full moon, then their microbiome can be adapted to that. I still think that obviously what you eat is very, very important, but it can be easily misunderstood. So much of it is your belief system and your attitude. Mm-hmm. Really is about diet, and people have, my mother ate like this and my father ate like this and they lived to be 60. So, if I get to be 60, that'll be good. But the thing I point out is that there are many civilizations around where their diet would be totally wrong. Like in northern Mexico, up in the mountains up there, there's a race, they wrote a book about them, the running people, I think. And they lived isolated because when Cortez and all them come into America, they couldn't get up to them, up in the mountains. So they were left alone. Or if a couple did get up there, they just disappeared into the mountains. So they never had that contact. And the contact has been more recent. Now, the interesting contact was the horror that, the scientists had was because the only food they eat is Indian corn. That's all they eat, nothing else but Indian corn, done every way. Fried, cooked, baked, and fermented. And didn't eat anything else. And yet they had extremely good health. And the reason they're called running people is that their fermented meat is they had this thing that once a week, the whole village would basically drink this fermented stuff and get wine drunk, and then take off and run, and they'd run 60 miles up and down the mountains, and without a break, and come back. And then once a month, they did 300 miles running and came back. And they didn't eat all the way, and they were drunk before they started and sober when they got back. And then when the goody two-shoes went up there, oh, this is terrible, you need more variety, etc. They took blood tests to take back and examine it. But before they did that, these people, oh, look, they started planting all different types of veggies and things like that. Look, you can have this and this and this, and showed them what to eat. Now, firstly, not long later, the blood test showed they had no deficiencies whatsoever in their body.
Mm-hmm.
They were extremely healthy, no deficiencies. In other words, even though the corn didn't contain all those things, their body had still converted them. And in fact, the ones then who started eating the food that was cooked for them to keep them healthy died. And it was a disaster for them.
Wow.
Because their body had balance to that, right? Whereas if I went up there and they only fed me corn for 2 months, I'd probably kill them, because I'm not a corn person. I'm a corn person, but very rarely. So we have to look at the different things. And of course, food is a very important thing. But the way I get a respect for the body and the energy system of the body and what it can do is that the number of people who, for example, haven't eaten for 20 years or 30 years, breatharians, there's a lot of them out there. Often it started by people like me, when I was going through naturopathic college and that way back, we got into fasting, and fasting was the thing. So I started fasting, and I fasted, and then I went from a 1-day fast to a 3-day fast to a 7-day fast and 10-day. Then I decided to do the 40-day fast. And I did my 40-day fast, and for about 12, 13 days, I was hungry. But after that, I wasn't hungry in the slightest. By the time I got to 40 days, the last thing I wanted to do was eat. I wasn't the slightest bit hungry. I had more energy than I've ever had in my life. I was studying hard, working hard, etc., and I just didn't want to eat. Now, I only started eating because the naturopathic teacher said, oh, no, you should never go more than 40 days on a fast. It's not good. So because of what he said, I went off it. It took a long time to get used to having to eat again. Now, a lot of people I have met decided not to go back on food. They just stayed off it and have stayed off it for many, many years, and their health has just kept improving. And the other interesting thing about their health is I've seen groups of them, and you'll see 30 of them in a group. And if you look at them and took a photo of them, they look like any group from anywhere in the world because there were short ones, tall ones, skinny ones, and fat ones. In fact, the one who's not eaten for 30 years was grossly overweight. Right? Now explain that.
I can't.
That's genetics, emotions, etc.
Mm.
And yet not eating at all, and yet overweight. And that's why we always think that overweight is automatically not eating properly and or eating the wrong things. No, it really is a state of mind and a state of the way we look at things. And the fact is, in certain cultures, having extra weight is something very important for the culture. For me, when I was developing Bodytalk, I needed more weight because the weight helped to anchor me. It earthed me, right? I'm a Capricorn, but it earthed me. So I put on too much weight. So a year ago, I decided I had too much weight. So I decided to lose weight. Now, I didn't change my diet. I didn't change anything. I maybe walked an extra mile a day. But my mental thing was, I was going to lose weight healthily. And since then, I've lost 82 pounds.
Amazing.
That's not bad, right?
Yeah.
Now I almost have to run around in a shower to get wet. But that's an Australian joke. It's a bit complex for you Canadians. But it wasn't a hard thing for me. It was a state of shifting my mental consciousness because I knew that I thought the weight at the time when I was doing it buffered me against some of the heavy energy work I was doing when I was, developing things and practicing things. And there are times when it can. There are times when your various professions and everything you need to have a bit more weight. Other times you need a bit less weight.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not about judging whether you need weight or not. This is where Bodytalk comes in because I get people coming into me, I want to lose 5 pounds. Why? Oh, well, I want to be able to fit this and this. And I've tested them. And I said, your body says you shouldn't lose weight. And if you try, you'll probably feel ill. Well, that's the trouble. Every time I lose 8 or 9 pounds, I get very ill. I said, that's your body talking to you. Don't do it. And I talked to her about it, and image and everything like that. I saw her a few months later. She had lost a pound or two, but she was healthy and happy. And she realized, it's not so bad to be big. Big is beautiful as well. And we've got to change our attitudes. I've seen people killing themselves with all the diet and exercise, and they're really not losing weight. And that's because they're not looking at the real issues that are going on. And one of the major issues is accepting your genes. If you're born in certain parts of the world, you're going to be short and dumpy. If you're born in other parts of the world, in Ethiopia, you're going to be long and be able to run 100 miles without losing your breath. But that's genetics that does that. And sure, genetics can go wrong. And I have a whole course, 2 courses, in fact, in Bodytalk, that's written by a top genetic researcher and myself, where we are working with epigenomes and things like that very successfully. And we're developing a whole system of treating genetic disorders by using Bodytalk. She's leading the research in it, but I contribute where I can. And she also ran a couple of the projects we did in verifying. One of the projects we did was with the National Institute of Health, and Laura, who's of course a PhD and well recognized, and a few other people. And it was to work out on the effect of Bodytalk at a distance, because that's always the thing. I can explain it scientifically, but they wanted practical factors. And particularly pain they were interested in, because pain is a major issue, particularly when return soldiers, etc. And so they did a very controlled experiment, and it was published in peer-reviewed journal, and we have, I think, a copy of it on the website. There's a long version of it and a short version of it, but it was heavily controlled. We got a whole lot of people who are in intractable pain. In other words, severe pain, such as from the war or whatever, car accidents, or sometimes just violent headaches. But it had it for years and virtually getting no help from medication. So we categorized them and broke them up into groups. And then we allocated a system whereby we had a control system. They didn't know they weren't getting treatment. They got treated after. I insisted on that. When it was all finished, we treated them. But they were our control. And the idea was they had to sit down at nighttime 3 days a week at 7 o'clock for half an hour in a chair and just sit there, because the practitioner was going to be treating them. Now, the practitioner was treating a person, but they did not know anything but their name and age, and they did not know what was wrong with them. They weren't told anything about why they had pain. It could have been because they had, a leg amputated and terrible pain, or it could have been ulcerative colitis or whatever. And they didn't know. And the patient did not know who the practitioner was. And what's more, we rotated the practitioners around so that they're being treated by different practitioners each time in Bodytalk. And therefore the practitioners were treating different patients, again, not knowing anything about them, what was wrong with them, just treating them. And each time, the day after the treatment, the patients filled out a form, to tabulate what they felt, how they felt, degree of pain levels, numbers, etc. And that went on for, I think they did it 3 times a week for 2 months, and then once a week for 2 months. And then it was all collated. They insisted it was a statistician at Stanford University, because it had to be bona fide that there was no rigged stuff going on. And it turned out the National Institute of Health said, if we can improve across the board, on average, a 14-15% increase in comfort, lack of pain type of thing, that would be incredible, because at this stage, the pain-killing drugs for these conditions is about a 5 to 10% increase, right, using the normal pain-killing stuff. And, it turned out our average was 70% increase.
Amazing.
It just blew the people away. It blew the others. And then the other ones that were the controlled experiment, the group, only one of them felt any change. Okay, well, we expected more than that. If you think you're getting treated, very often you'll respond a bit. And so we treated all them after that to get them better.
Nice.
And that's remarkable because it was a totally controlled experiment where not only didn't the patients didn't know I was treating them, the practitioners didn't know the patients, didn't even know the diagnosis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet they were doing just straight Bodytalk protocol to tell them what to do, and it was getting assessed, and then it was a full statistician set up by the National Institute of Health that then analyzed all the data and came up with that. And the National Institute of Health said that was absolutely remarkable. They've never seen anything like it.
Is this written up somewhere that we can read it on
Yes. Well, you can read the condensed version on our website.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on the website there's a link if you want to click on it that gives you the detailed version.
Okay.
Yeah, all the methodology, analysis, everything like that.
Is it on the NIH website?
Yes, and it's on ours as well.
Great. Awesome.
And it's out there. And as I said, I forget peer-reviewed journal was it was a European one, but focused around neurological pain and things like that. So we're written up in that, which was very prestigious to get. So we've had a few things like that. We've had some. We've done quite a few experiments, but the problem is doing them under supervision. Government supervision and National Institute of Health supervision is sort of much better because it's got much more credibility. And we're looking at doing that. What I have found is that a big concern is post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes.
Especially amongst vets. And I've talked to a few of the people. In fact, a couple of generals have recommended that they do a study in Bodytalk for it because they've heard the results, etc., especially post-traumatic stress disorder. I have found we can get good response quickly with it. The interesting thing is what I've actually found in many cases in things like this, the worse the case, the better the result and the quicker. Why
is that?
I don't know. Maybe the body's desperate enough to sort of respond to you and get things fixed up. It's always been a question for me because I've always found that the worse the heart condition, the better the result I'm going to get and the quicker.
Mm-hmm.
The good example of that and reason why the Army got interested in me is because there was a couple of generals who knew of me through a few contacts, and one of them had Bodytalk, and they sent me a client and asked me if I'd see him. And this client, I still don't know his name, but he's the most highly decorated soldier America's ever had. But he got all his decorations inside the White House with no publicity because most of his work was top secret.
Mm-hmm.
He worked behind the scenes in Vietnam, and then he did a lot of work for the CIA and things like that, which is what they call wet work, which is not very nice. But he was, like the number one master of war and killing, basically. And I think the general told me he had actually had to execute something like 500 people, either in the war or for the government, which was pretty horrific. And yet he walked in, and by the way, his pain was so bad and his PTSD was so bad, he could not sleep at all. So once every 2 weeks, they took him into the hospital and put him under anesthetic for a day.
Mm.
And that's the only time he got to sleep. And other than that, he was like that. And he came in, and I remember when he came in, I thought, oh my God. I think I'm pretty good at martial arts. And his energy was, I'm not taking this guy on, if I have a bazooka, He just had that energy. Yet the sweetest guy, absolutely sweetest guy. He was big. I'm 6'2", and he was towered over me. So I don't know how he hid in the jungle. He probably pretended to be a big tree. But anyway, I shook his hand, made sure I talked very nicely to him. But he was a sweetheart. And I put him on the table. I started working with him a bit. And, normally they explained to me he would have had no trouble suiciding. No big deal. But he had a wife and 2 small children.
Mm.
And, of course, he wouldn't do it for them. And he absolutely adored the 3 of them. So when I put him on the table, I did some work. And it was pretty basic work, just active memories of things that would go on. But it was like a clean sweep, not individual things. But he really got into it. And we get him to roll their eyes and do a few things like that to actually process it in the brain. And the treatment took about 10 minutes. And I got nothing else at that stage. And I said, look, you got to come back tomorrow. And he had come down for a month if necessary. Let's see what's happening. There's a lot happening there, but we'll follow up tomorrow. And he came in the next day. He was a totally different personality, totally different posture, everything like that. Red eyes. And he sat down and he says, since I went from here to the hotel, and until the moment I got out of the hotel to come back here, I have not stopped crying.
Oh my gosh.
And I've never cried in my life before. And as I cried, I saw all those things happening and me crying them out. They were just falling on the floor. That was his image of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I put him on the table and I said, well, let's see what's necessary. Nothing. I did not need to do a thing as a second treatment. I sent him home. He says, I'll come down here for a month. Something serious. And I said, do you feel bad now? No, I feel fantastic. Will I say that way? Well, your body says so. So I sent him home. And he's continued to write to me because he has stayed perfect. And he keeps wanting me to visit him in Atlanta to see his wife and kids, etc. And the interesting thing, he's got a job as he's the head of security for one of the big firms there. That firm doesn't know how safe they are with that guy. I think the whole of Russia could try and invade that place and he would hold them off. Yeah, yet typically he was a total sweetheart. And because he was such a genuine person, I think, and he was a deeply religious person, that's why it was very hard for him to do the work he did. He just had to believe that he was doing God's work because it was America, you know?
Mm.
And so he was the perfect type of patient. But still, that was pretty spectacular. And when he reported back to his generals, that's why they were pretty keen to get my work going for the Army. And we're still negotiating that. But it just, having the right person to do all the treating and everything like that is a bit of a problem. They all want me to do it, of course, but I just can't do it.
Well, and you want to pass on, I mean, 100 years from now, you want this to still be taught and passed on. So it's best that you focus on making trainers.
And I do, and we've got a few hundred advanced instructors now. We've got a few hundred more. We've got about 500 or 400 access teachers. We're teaching in 11 languages, in 30 countries. And we're in the curriculum of various universities. My AnimalTalk, Bodytalk for Animals, is actually a course in 3 universities in Southeast Asia that are veterinary universities as part of their veterinary course now. But it's happening, and I've got a lot of people doing it. And right now, I'm mainly focusing on rewriting everything, establishing the curriculums, and setting it up in our campus, which is Prima Campus, which is there. And on Prima Campus, we have all the courses that are necessary for Bodytalk, but we also have a whole lot of special interest courses that tie in with that from experts from all over the world and different courses I teach other than Bodytalk. And I'm training people, and we've got a lot of very good people out there. Actually, my problem is not so much training people to be good practitioners and to teach it. That's an easy deal. The hardest part is finding, when you're trying to find replacements for me, is people who have enough medical knowledge and medical intuition to be able to work out new ways of applying it, which has been my strength. I write new courses because I think of new ways of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And getting people with that type of experience. I've been in the game 50 years, and I always had the philosophy, if you're in healthcare, you're always a student. And
yes.
There's never been a week gone by that I haven't studied. And I'm looking for people. At the moment, I'm putting together a committee. And I'm hoping that between all the people in the committee, they'll have covered pretty well every place.
Wonderful. Well, I hope that someone who's listening is going to be on your committee. I hope that this interview has helped to reach the people that you need to reach to continue to grow and expand Bodytalk, so that it is a system of medicine that is used for hundreds and thousands of years to come. And I know that it is bettering humanity, especially something that brings the empowerment back into our hands and allows us to treat our body holistically, but also treat our planet holistically with our animals and our plants, and seeing that there's that interconnection that we have with the world. I think it's a beautiful system. I'm really, really excited. I'm definitely going to find a local practitioner and explore it. I can't wait to take the Access course myself. I think it's going to be fantastic. And I'm so excited that today we were given the opportunity to educate the Learn True Health listeners from you, from the horse's mouth, about your system. Thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been incredible. Absolutely.
If I could mention one thing.
Yes.
I'm not a fanatic in so much as I totally recognize the immense value of medicine. And, you know, if I chop my hand off, I don't want a body talker tapping me on the head. I want a surgeon to sew it back on.
Sure.
And to me, I'm always about cooperating with the other systems rather than criticize them.
Mm-hmm.
Because, okay, I can do some things better than they can, but I can assure you they can do a lot of things better than me, depending on the thing. So I don't knock any other system. I work with them because I embrace all different aspects. I'd like to think Bodytalk's probably the most widely holistic of the systems in so much as the broad scope of practice, but at the same time, it has its limitations. And as such, when I'm in practice, I still refer people to other practitioners and to doctors, etc. And to me, the way to get on, and the reason I've always got on well so with doctors is I'm not critical of them, and I consider what they do as important. I just would like to educate them in that there's some things they do would be better handled with natural therapies because it'd be less traumatic to the patient.
Right.
Or faster. Okay, well, I'm very glad you invited me. And I normally wouldn't have spoken to you this long, being Canadian, but, you know, I can handle that. You notice I spoke simply with simple words.
Yeah,
So
thank you. I appreciate that. I love your humor. I adore you. I adore your work. Thank you so much, John, for coming on the show. This has been such a pleasure having you here today. Please come back on the show anytime you want a platform to reach out to an audience that is hungry, that is thirsty for holistic health information. We'd love to have you back.
Yeah, well, there is actually one thing I didn't talk about because it takes too long to talk about, but it's my new development, and that is, communication and using the right communication system. And normally in healthcare, we use the nerves, the blood vessels, lymph vessels, energy channels, etc. And in my work with quantum work, the fact is the fastest communication system transport for information is torsion fields. And torsion fields are manufactured constantly in every cell in the body, in the nucleus, to send information to every other cell as part of it. The way of healing, it's the fastest system. And I've now worked out how to utilize that, which means that in some serious conditions, because it works so fast, it can treat something that normally there wouldn't be enough time to treat it, because you can, in other words, very often serious conditions will actually change in minutes on the table when you use a system. But it's one that's an advanced system. You've got to understand it, and you've got to learn a bit about physics. But I'm a pretty good physics teacher.
Well, I'd love to have you back on the show if you would like to come back, and we can discuss and learn all about your system of communication in healing the body. That would be phenomenal.
So if you don't mind a little bit of quantum theory thrown in.
Oh, that'd be great. I'm excited.
Well, we'll make a date.
Terrific.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you so much, John. I can't wait to have you back on the show.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Are you looking to optimize your health? Are you looking to get the best supplements at the lowest price? For high quality supplements and to talk to someone about what supplements are best for you, go to takeyoursupplements.com, and one of our fantastic True Health coaches will help you pick out the right supplements for you that are the highest quality and the best price. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Takeyoursupplements.com. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Be sure to ask about free shipping and our awesome referral program.